Before I start the Dharma talk is, again, a call out to all those who are supporting us at this time. Last Sunday, we spoke specifically about our wonderful doctors, our RNs and hospital support staff, which are supporting the countless ill from the coronavirus throughout our country and throughout the world. And today I want to give a call out to all the other unsung heroes that are supporting us this time, especially those who are working in our grocery stores and those who are working in our warehouses and our truck drivers that are bringing the food and the things that we need to be able to survive. They are unsung heroes. And I want to give a gasho and a thank you to each one of them as they help and make sure that we all have the necessities we need to live. Okay. Also, too, I want to take a moment, and I would like all of us to just take a minute to think about what you are grateful for, right now, and make sure you just put it in your chat function in your Zoom and share it with everyone in the community. What is it that you are so grateful for right now today as we come together as a community? So let's go ahead and start with today's Dharma talk. And today's Dharma talk, now some people may be experiencing this, some may not. I think one of the biggest challenges, especially for us who are working at home, is to figure out how to negotiate the new work arrangement, home arrangement. One of the things that some friends have shared with me, and their children are older, is that they're getting really bored. And I want to talk about boredom. I want to talk about boredom as a gift to practice. So I want to share some ideas I have and some feelings I have about that. So for today's Dharma talk, I want to talk about moving toward boredom instead of away from boredom. And especially since many of us right now are dancing as fast as we can, maybe to keep the boredom at bay. And we may not even be aware that we're doing it. For me, it manifests when I'm into my third hour of binge watching something on Netflix. And for me, I'm not thinking that is boredom, even though I may be bored with what I'm watching. But I think the need to watch 3 hours of Netflix is an unconscious desire to avoid or move away from boredom instead of towards it. What I want to do is I want to share some ideas with you as not an antidote against boredom, but praise, gift, and a moving towards boredom and the embrace of it in however it manifests. For many of our kids with no school and their separation from their friends, we are probably all hearing a louder chorus than usual, "I'm bored." My 5-year-old is telling me the same thing, especially when we limit his screen time. If he could have all the screen time he wanted, that would not be an issue. Now, and I think many of us create activities for them and ourselves to avoid, conscious or unconscious, the dreaded boredom, that it won't overwhelm us. And we become creative and even proficient at keeping boredom away. Maybe some of us have used this time to start a regular meditation practice, and even in our meditation practice, we may get there on our cushion sitting 5, 10, 20 minutes, let our incense and ring our bell, and find it is extremely boring. This is the first barrier that most beginning meditators experience in a meditation practice. And it can be one of the most persistent in our practice, especially for those in a culture where the doing is more important than what we are doing. Um, and this cultural um, fear or dislike of boredom can make it very difficult and can make our relationship from boredom very difficult. From time to time, we are kids. When we were kids, boredom was unwelcomed. And as an adult, sometimes it can become an oppressive guest. This is nothing new. Writers and philosophers have been talking about boredom for hundreds of years. The great existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called it the root of all evil. Schopenhauer considered it a particular kind of misery, and that life was simply an endless pendulum swinging back and forth between desire and bored, and both were unpleasant. During medieval Christianity, it was thought that when someone was bored, they were morally flawed. Wendell O'Brien, a historian, has written, quote, "If God, God's world, and the life God has ordained for you seem boring to you, there is almost certainly something wrong with your soul, something you had better hasten to fix." End quote. Jeez. Maybe they were onto something. I think our issues with boredom go back even farther. Maybe the truth behind the Adam and Eve story wasn't that Eve tempted Adam at all. Adam said to Eve, "This Garden of Eden is so boring." And Eve said, "Oh, darling, only boring people are boring. Go find something to do." And looking for any way not to be bored, he found that pretty tree. Yeah, God said something about not eating it, but he was so bored and it looked so yummy. It's rather insidious, this thing called boredom. And it's not that you're experiencing boredom, it's that you yourself are boring. I remember hearing that when I was younger. If you're bored, it's because you're boring. And who wants to be known as boring? It's an insult, isn't it? And yet we say to our kids, to our friends, that it's as if we are so afraid of boredom that we need to blame the victim of boredom. It's your fault. It's your fault if you are bored. And it's interesting, if you just Google boredom and read the majority of links, even some Buddhist links, it's not a good thing to be bored. Bored is bad. There was one Zen link that was saying why a good practitioner should never be bored. Other links were sure to tell me that if I am bored, it's because I am ungrateful, lazy, or in need of medication. Well, the last might be true, but for other reasons. I think that when we have these kinds of judgments about boredom, it's saying more about our own relationship with boredom than anything about boredom itself. And I must admit that from time to time, I have bought into this kind of logic and blamed myself for being bored. So I want to ask you, and you can respond in the chat function to the group, what is your relationship with boredom? Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, thank you. Now, I know some of us never feel bored, and that's true. There's plenty of times when I rarely feel bored, and one of the things I'm going to challenge you today is to be bored, is to create and cultivate boredom, and I'll explain why in a minute. And I think one of the biggest challenges with boredom is our cultural tendency towards having to be active, having to be active. And it reminds me of the Zen story we talk about here in Sangha about a young monk who goes to his master and says, you know, I'm vexated by the world. I'm vexated by life. Um, the winds of what are going on are stressing me out, and the the story the master tells his student, he goes, what should I do? And the master says, sit, just sit. He goes, well, no, you got to give me something to do. And he says, okay, see that mountain over there? Go bring me that mountain. Bring it to me. And of course, the young monk is like, I can't do that. What is he talking about? And I think that's our tendency, that we need to go do something when the actual best case is not to actually have to do anything, but to become intimate with just sitting and intimate with boredom. And we'll talk more about that. I think for some of us, our relationship with boredom may be a blind spot. And I know I did. The last thing that inspired this talk um, was certain things that we do when there's nothing going on. And what's the first thing we do when nothing is going on? Or we're not engaged with something, is we pick up our smartphone. We pick up our phone and we start scrolling through our phone. That simple activity of picking up the phone to scroll through it, I think, is a unconscious effort to alleviate that space or that gap where we are not stimulated, where we are bored. And we look for that thing that is going to help keep it at bay. We instinctively reach for our phone. On a certain level, how could we ever really be bored when we have so many distractions in front of us, constantly demanding our attention or giving us a way out? We almost need to walk towards boredom instead of away from it. Heidegger, the German philosopher, wrote, quote, "We ourselves are asleep in our everyday pastime to our actual life. We like being asleep. We like lives of slumbering distractions. We seek to be occupied because it liberates us from the emptiness of boredom." End quote. Now, this is not surprising, since social media is our new bulwark, the new fortress we've built against boredom, against the feelings that arise out of boredom. In our contemporary vernacular, build the wall, end quote. Our modern society has tackled the scourge of boredom with 1,000 TV channels, movies, and games on demand. And I think a lot of us may be moving towards those as we are, in a certain level, trapped within our homes because of the virus. And we have a smorgasbord of novelty and distraction. And up until recently, 1,000 things a day demanded our attention. Our smartphones are like a siren call of the ancient Greek myth of the sirens themselves, whose enchanting singing sailors could not pull themselves away from and were dashed upon the rocks. Our social media and our smartphones were designed for that. They are engines of addiction. And as we understand our longing for novelty, or as Tolstoy described it, boredom as desire for desire, understanding our desire for desire, the designed little machine that we have is just for that purpose. Our modern society is designed to keep boredom at bay. And now many of those same things that demanded our attention have become ever so quiet because of our having to work at home, our stay in place orders, whatnot, our social caring, which is keeping us from each other, except through virtual means. And I think sometimes in this forced isolation, we may be noticing a subtle dis-ease, a creeping dukkha with all this disconnection. And we need to be aware that in our attempt to cure ourselves of boredom, we may be entertaining ourselves into a deepening alienation from ourselves and the world. The cure is often worse than the affliction. What we do lose when we vilify boredom, we lose an invitation to get to know ourselves as we are and to know time itself. In some ways, boredom is a gate we need to open and walk through as part of our Buddhist practice. Many of you have already experienced this in your meditation practice. I love this quote from Nietzsche. Quote, "He who fortifies himself completely against boredom fortifies himself against himself or herself too. He or she will never drink the most powerful elixir from his own innermost spring." End quote. I love that because I never thought of boredom in that way. But then again, how would I? Many of us have never ever really paid attention to boredom itself. I rarely have, except to endure it during sitting meditation. And I appreciate this, again from Wendell O'Brien, quote, "Profound boredom can set us on the road to authenticity. When boredom works its magic, what is left is nothing than being itself and its meaning." End quote. Boredom is nothing more than the desire for desire, as Tolstoy wrote. But isn't that the idea of awakening, to free ourselves from our attachment to desire? Or is it the pain that can be found in boredom? Is the ego self in a moment of realizing that it has been freed from desire and suddenly panicking? Shit, I better desire something, or what good am I for? Is that why we run from boredom? And instead of running away from boredom, we should invite it. We should cultivate it wholeheartedly. Come as you are. Namo Amida Butsu, we say to boredom itself. Come teach me your lessons. Teach me about the reality of time, about the shallowness of desire, and about myself. I really appreciate this from Josh Korda of the New York Dharma Punks. He has taught, quote, "The Buddhist practice with discomfort is to turn towards it, to investigate it, to look beneath it, to really take it apart and examine what's present. The more we take boredom apart, the more interesting it becomes." End quote. For me, the most fascinating thing at the heart of boredom is reality as it is, pure and undisturbed beingness. Again, Heidegger, quote, Boredom removes an illusion of meaning from things and allows them to appear as they are, emptiness and nothingness. Who in her right mind would want to remove such an illusion? End quote. Boredom can strip us clean of our stories so we can begin to see things as they really are. And I want to share with you some lines from an amazing piece of writing from Joseph Brodsky, the poet. And I found this while preparing this talk. And it's his essay called In Praise of Boredom. And it's just a kind of a little longer section, but here we go. Quote, when hit by boredom, go for it. Let yourself be crushed by it. Submerge, hit bottom, exact, full at the worst. The reason boredom deserves such scrutiny is that it represents pure, undiluted time in all its repetitive, redundant, monotonous splendor. Boredom is your window on time's infinity, which is to say, on your insignificance in it. That's what accounts perhaps for one's dread of lonely, torpid evenings, for the fascination with which one watches sometimes a fleck of dust in a swirl in a sunbeam, and somewhere a clock tick-tocks, the day is hot, and your willpower is at zero. Once this window opens, don't try to shut it. On the contrary, throw it wide open. For boredom speaks the language of time, and it is so to teach you the most valuable lesson. It puts your existence and into its perspective, the net result of which is humility. The more you learn about your own size, the humbler and the more compassionate you become to your likes, to that dust, a swirl in a sunbeam of already immobile atop your table. Ah, how much life went into those flecks, not from your point of view, but from theirs. You are to them what time is to you. That's why they look so small. And do you know what the dust says when it's being wiped off the table? End quote. Boredom is interesting after all. And this idea of experiencing time, of being in time, is a powerful lesson of boredom. When we are bored, we welcome an invasion. We welcome the bodhisattvas of boredom, helping us put our lives into perspective by going deeper into our relationship with desire and time. It strips us of our stories and lays us bare in our nakedness. We can discover a greater humility and compassion, but we won't if we're unable to welcome it when it comes, to say Namo Amida Butsu. So how can we do this? The first thing is our welcoming. Come as you are and attend to it as a guest. Put the phone down. Turn the TV off. Shut down the computer. I like this from Ed Hallowell. He's a meditation teacher. He says, quote, when you find yourself attaching the label bored to your experience, ask where in your body are you feeling it? What thoughts are percolating in my mind? Are there ideas of wanting to get away, wishing things were different? Or am I identifying as helpless, unbothered, or restless? For me, the restlessness of time is what I am exploring. So my encouragement for you in the coming weeks is when you find yourself flipping through the channels trying to find a movie on Netflix or on Amazon Prime or whatever it is that you have, simply stop. Don't. Don't watch another hour of a show. Don't try to find a movie to watch. Turn it off. Invite boredom. Invite it as a guest and as a teacher. And when your children are saying, we're bored, let them be bored. It will be a great gift that you can give them. An opportunity for self-exploration, creativity, and awareness. Namo Amida Butsu.